Thank you for being here tonight. Happy Saturday. Hope your weekend is going well so far. So, tonight we have a special guest on. So, Corey, I had met through the Hex community. So, for anyone who's not from that crypto community, hex.com. So, a lot of us on High Strangeness met on there, and Corey had me on a show a few weeks ago. Or maybe that was last month, almost a month ago. I'm losing track of time, and we were on Gen Hex and It Is Now's one their stream together, and we had talked a little High Strangeness. We realized we have some interest in common, and Corey has a lot of interesting experience with that. So I thought it would be fun to have him on the show. Before I do, let me quickly say hey to the chat. Hey Doug, hey my online ghost, Mobius, my life is awesome. Lit, nice to see you. Samantha, so nice to see you guys. Thank you all for being here tonight. And without further ado, here is Corey. Thank you so much, Corey, for being on tonight.
I am very happy to be on tonight. Thank you so much. And yes, it's been more than a couple of weeks. It's almost been a month and a half.
Oh shoot. Yeah, I have no sense of time anymore.
It's okay. I understand completely. I totally understand that.
Yeah, and maybe it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but I am like, they've reset our clocks somehow through some sort of behavioral something through lockdowns, and I believe that's completely intentional. I don't behave the same way in my hours and in my timekeeping and nothing. So, have you found the same thing?
I literally have the most degenerate sleep schedule, so I don't even know half the time what time it is when I wake up, because it's usually dark when I wake up.
Ooh,
Um,
okay.
so I don't even know what the sun looks like anymore. So I'll tell you, it's very fun. Let me tell you, I'll tell you that much, to try to figure out what time it is, what day it is. I don't even, whatever day it is, it don't matter to me.
Yeah, you got that opposite schedule going.
Right, you gotta do what needs to be done.
Yeah, you know what? Whatever works for you. I mean, the powers that be, I'm sure, don't want us up late or up all night, so you might as well do the opposite that they want, right?
Exactly. They don't want you to know what's going on behind closed doors while everyone's sleeping.
No, no, they want us, and consume less electricity and eat the bugs. So,
And we'll make sure your votes don't count during the night.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, somebody's got to stay up and watch those vote counting. But I guess we'll keep our mouths shut before we get booted off of here. But Corey, can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive in?
Sure. No, I appreciate this. So, I started getting into cryptocurrency in 2017. Started really working in the space around 2018. And I started my YouTube channel around 2019 for another company that I worked for called Icon, and I started doing videos for them. And I was just building up my YouTube channel in that community. And then I decided to branch out and see what other communities there were. And I stumbled upon Hex through Pulse Chain, through learning about Pulse Chain and seeing how large the community was. And I started making videos for Pulse Chain. I started realizing that, Pulse Chain third-party projects weren't really being given a voice. And I was like, you know what? Let me maybe try to set a precedent. And that's what I did. So, for about a year and not a year and a half, but probably a year and 4 months, I've been in the Hex and Pulse Chain community now, and I've been trying to branch out to bring people to Hex through interviewing, some of the most well-known people in cryptocurrency: Big Boy, Charles Hoskinson, Crypto Wendy, David Gokhshtein, Benjamin Cohen, Crypto Capital Venture. So yeah, it's basically what I've been trying to do, and I'm going to try to continue doing that.
It's awesome, and I see you've had so much growth, and you're definitely getting a lot of attention, and your guests just keep getting bigger and bigger. So congratulations on that, and I wish you continued success in the future with that. It's pretty awesome, and
Thank you so much.
And it was fun being on your show. And I think one of the appealing factors of both of us being on the same show for a lot of people was the way we speak. Apparently, it's different.
Yeah, we're both well spoken. We both have accents.
Yeah,
And
the proper way.
yes, we're articulate vernacular.
Yes.
I'm presuming articulate vernacular with a little New York twist. Hey, how you doing? And I'm presuming you're also Italian, which I think you brought up in my stream.
Yeah,
Partially.
half. My mother's side is from there. Yeah.
And we're
And
both educators. Well, we both basically like I only student taught. You were actually in the profession. I've been trying to maybe find something in teaching, but
but you
um,
escaped in time, basically.
I did. Yes, I did.
Yeah, let me
I
tell you guys. I was so impressed because when I was on Corey's show, he gave me such a teachery outline that was so like I knew everything of what to expect, and it was so like laid out and perfect. I'm like, you could tell this guy was a teacher. And even though I was a teacher, I wasn't that kind of teacher. Maybe
All
you
right.
could say degenerate teacher. I was a little all over the place. Work got done. Everybody was happy with me, but but I had to fly by the seat of my pants, but that was pretty cool to get that outline.
Yeah, it
And
was. I try to just keep people prepared, and just make sure that people are they know what's going to happen on the stream. I want to make sure that they feel comfortable, prepared, aware of what's going to happen. I don't like to throw curveballs to people. It's not my shtick. So I just wanted to give out the lesson plan without the Common Core standards for you.
oh, exactly. Yeah, there you go. I was surprised there wasn't like an aim at the top, you know.
No,
You
no,
went-
God, no. I wasn't trying to give you. I wasn't trying to give you a semester syllabus. I promise.
Hey, but you know what? It was awesome because especially if you have guests on that are like not familiar with live streaming, like your first few times as a guest can be intimidating. So for
Yes,
people like
again.
that, I'm sure like that is such a comfort to be able to see that. And I'm just gonna hop over to Brian's comment a second because Brian and I share a home county, so neither of you have accents. It's the rest of them. Thank you, Brian. Phonetically, I'm like we are speaking the English language properly. I've thought about this a lot. I've done my research. Um, so, and I'm curious, being that you're from Long Island's got a lot of weird stuff that
Long
goes on all the
Island.
time.
Yes, yes, yes. That is very true.
I mean,
You have
from
a lot.
from Nassau all the way to the end, there's like something weird for everyone, I feel like.
Yes, there is. I mean, there's the pumpkin festival. When you go to the pumpkin festival during Halloween, there's a lot of history on Long Island. There's a lot of, for example, like I was doing a student teaching in a certain town, and couple blocks away, there was a small graveyard the size of like a plot of a house. And basically, the people who were laid to rest there were the founders of that town. And they were born in like the 1680s. And it was literally like a little tiny graveyard right next to a house. And it was literally on a block. It was very strange. And then, like, you have you have 19th century turn of the century castles that are on the Gold Coast of Long Island on the North Shore. You have a lot of houses that were built in the 18th century, and you have a lot of history in both Nassau County and Suffolk County. And it's actually the house that I live in was a former congregation house for priests.
Oh wow.
So I figured I'd bring that up since we were going to talk
Yeah.
about ghosts and spirituality. So my house was a former congregation center for the Catholic diocese for local priests.
So yeah.
Like
So
the land that I'm on per se. It's not the house that I'm in, but the land thereof was initially a diocese.
oh, okay, gotcha. So it wasn't
Yeah.
like your house wasn't where they were congregating,
Oh
but you're
no, no,
on
no.
that land. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Which still carries something. It still carries a spiritual significance, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
Yeah, I mean, and I think to me that would carry a good spiritual significance because good things were happening on the land. But especially with New York, we have so much history, and unfortunately, a lot of dark things that happen around here too. So you
Yes.
do it could go either way with land in the area. And one of the other things that I find so fascinating is it's not just like weirdness and ghost on all of Long Island. I mean, it's even like pretty dark government stuff if you get all the way out to Montauk. And
Mhm.
for anyone who's not familiar with that, the Montauk Project, Stranger Things was based on the Montauk Project. And
Plum Island.
what?
Plum Island. Yep.
Plum Island, the likely origin of Lyme disease. And even one of
Yep.
you affected with Lyme disease, I would look into the Plum Island experiments. So it's
Yep.
kind of, yeah, highly likely that was a man-made disease. That blew my mind. So I'm like, there's really so much that does go on in this region. And just to hop
Right.
back to Montauk a second, something that I find really interesting is, for anyone who's ever been to Montauk, is that it's a state park. I don't think it's a national park. It's a state park. I don't know. It's one of those federal parks or government parks. But when you go there, so all the land up on top is, public land, but there's restrictions on the underground land, which I find pretty telling of
Yeah.
what, so there's some belief that stuff is still happening underground, but other people are like, oh, it's just abandoned. It's an abandoned base and they just don't want anybody touching it. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't doubt it. There's still things going on. I mean, we have like so much weird history. We have the Tesla plant out here. We have the story
Oh,
of like Lake Ronkonkoma, of like the
mm,
lady of the lake that like
mm,
it was
mm.
there were different Native American populations that populated different parts of the lake. And like a princess drowned, and like supposedly if you go out there at night, um, and you're rowboating, there's like a pit in the lake that no one knows, that the Native American princess takes you down. There's actually like a little statue of her right outside the outskirts of Lake Ronkonkoma.
Oh, really?
um, yeah, but do I think work is still going on there? Absolutely. I still believe that uh, if you want to take it to like Plum Island, which is only like 40 miles off the coast of Montauk, that's
Mm,
still a restricted island.
mm.
You still can't go there, to my knowledge. So I wouldn't doubt it if there was um, some type of eh, some type of work going on there. Also, for a while, you couldn't go up to the lighthouse. I'm not even sure if you can go to the lighthouse now. But I know for like 2-3 years you weren't able to go inside the lighthouse.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
because most of them you can tour. So it would,
yeah.
yeah, especially, yeah. So that one, I mean, anything is weird that goes on out there. Everything kind of makes you wonder. And it's also interesting because I feel like Montauk was the only place that I've been where where I've never seen stars like that. It's so
Mhm.
intense. The just because, on three sides you have ocean and it's jutting out into the ocean, which also makes me wonder. Okay, yes, they say it's a strategic position for a former military base, the end of Long Island. But I also wonder, I'm like, you have clear skies, anything could come and land and nobody would
Yep.
notice because there's ocean, or they could go out to sea and intercept anything and no one would ever notice. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of weird things that do go on out there. But it's interesting you bring up Lake Ronkonkoma. I had read about that years ago and completely forgot about that.
Yep.
But can you tell everybody about the disappearances that happened on Lake Ronkonkoma? Have you
Sure.
heard something? Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to also bring up, because you were talking about like sightings, that missile strike that happened in the Long Island Sound in the 90s. I don't know if you remember that. Right at the height of the not at the height. It was right was it right before the end of the Cold War, or right before the end? But there was there was a small plane, and there was a missile attack that the government tried to cover up. Um, but in Lake Ronkonkoma, there were numerous different. It was mostly men. I think it was all men,
Mhm.
that went missing because the princess, specifically, of the Native American tribe. I forgot which tribe it was exactly, but there were numerous tribes that covered different types of different parts of the lake, and she only drowns men.
Oof.
So yeah, she's a third wave feminist to my knowledge, and and so I'm not sure how many people have died, or went missing, but I do know, to my knowledge, it's over 5 people since like since the late 19th century
Oh,
that have
wow.
been missing as a result of that lake, and that's the largest natural lake on Long Island, Lake Ronkonkoma.
Okay. Oh, and it's
And
interesting, just a side note, the lady in the lake that drowns people, isn't that also the haunting of, Bly Manor? If you've ever seen that? Isn't that I'm like, I'm wondering if they were inspired. That was one of the plots in, Bly Manor, but spoiler alert. Not a major spoiler. But, something else I remember hearing about Lake Ronkonkoma is also the people that disappear end up miles and miles away. Sometimes they're found. So people have wondered, is there like a subterranean tunnel system that goes out
that's
there? Yeah.
that's what that derives itself from, and it derives itself from the idea that there is a type of tunnel system in Ronkonkoma Lake
Mm.
that does lead out somewhere else. The bottom of the lake, I'm looking it up right now. I think it's 66 feet. Let me just check. Lake Ronkonkoma. Let me see. Actual lake. Lake Ronkonkoma Death. The first thing that comes up is Lake Ronkonkoma Deaths.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, so I was completely off. I said it
Mm.
was 5 or 6. Um, Legend has it that in the 1600s, a young Setauket Indian princess named Tusquanta fell madly in love with a blonde bearded woodcutter she spotted one day across the water. So this is probably in the 1600s. This is probably the Dutch, not the English yet, because the English started coming over here in either the 1630s or 40s, and she became obsessed with him, and she never got a response, and she stabbed herself in the heart
Mm.
in the middle of the lake. And she made it a mission to grab a young man from her watery grave to replace her love. And since between the late, I was completely off, between the mid to late 1800s and late 1970s, there were at least 160 drownings at the lake. I said 3 to 5. I was completely off.
Wow.
So there is rumor that there is a tunnel system, and I don't know, but I do know I don't know how deep the lake is. I think the max depth is like 80 feet,
Hmm.
something like that. But I do know that Lake Ronkonkoma is I go there often. I don't live close to Lake Ronkonkoma, but I go there often. It's beautiful. I have pictures that I've actually put on Twitter of it. Um, and it's a very strange area. It's very wooded around Lake Ronkonkoma. It's very it freezes over in the
Hmm.
winter. Um, the Lady of the Lake statue is right in front of the lake itself. There's a mini beach, and you're not allowed to swim that far into the lake. You're only able to swim like I want to say like 20 feet in at most.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
it's a very interesting lake, a very interesting perspective because New York, you're from New York as well. There's a lot of Native American um, spiritual, not scenarios, but tribes and notions in this region. You have so many different tribes that were in New York.
Oh,
So
for
on
sure.
Long Island specifically too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, so many of our towns and different sections in the state, or yeah, all carry those Native American names,
Yep.
and it's interesting, yeah, because you do wonder, like, sometimes some of the bad things in certain areas. I'm like, is it connected to the land? Is it connected to cursing the land? Because there's a belief that, like, what is it, Skinwalker Ranch, that it has those issues because it's cursed land, because it was being taken from them. They cursed it. So, you wonder how much of that has gone on throughout the country, and especially in New York, because we know that with those tribes, there were some tribes that were friendly, and there were some tribes that were very hostile. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and so and there was peace between colonists with some tribes, and then there were
Yep.
some tribes, yeah. So you don't know what kind of spiritualism was happening in the scenarios where there weren't peace, and it really makes you think. And it's like, is that why we have so many UFO issues? Is that why? And I call it issues because it kind of does feel like an infestation sometimes over here. And Lyd actually had a question about that. How do you feel about extraterrestrial topics?
Did you see what I said right after?
Oh, I didn't see. Oh, yeah, there, there we go.
Okay. So I'm excited for this story. So
Mhm.
my grandfather was the vice president, created a company, was a co-founder of a company that created military diagnostic and logistic equipment for the Air Force.
Okay.
Um, Sold some aerodynamics to during the
Mhm.
Cold War. Sold them to America. Sold them to Belgium. Sold them to I believe Belgium is the one he used to highlight that he sold the most to. So knowing about aerodynamics and having very close connections to high ranking authorities in the Air Force, one day my mother my aunt, my grandmother, and my grandfather in the late 60s. So my mother was like 4. They were coming home from one of the beaches on Long Island, and there was this star that kept kept appearing to find them. Not find them, but it kept appearing to get closer and closer.
Mm.
And my grandmother kept looking back at it, and it just kept getting closer and closer. And it was very strange because it was very small. So they started getting very nerve wracked as they were getting close to home. So they got into the house, and by the time they got into the driveway, it almost seemed like it was close enough to be, 100 to 200 feet away, but it still looked very small. So what happened is being my grandfather was very well adept to understanding 747, I'm not sure if those planes existed back then. I believe they did. Understanding different types of planes, different types of aircraft. He looked in the backyard to just see if everything was gone and if everything was all right. And we have a cherry tree that's about 30 feet in the backyard. And there was a hovering disc over the cherry tree, according to him. The cherry tree was probably about the size, not the cherry tree. The disc was probably about the size of, I guess you could say, I'm not good with width, but I guess you could say it was the size of like a decent sized circular room, not gigantic, but enough to house like 5, 6 people in it. And it was just hovering there. And they kept looking at it, and it was not moving. It was just staying there. And this is before drones existed. This is This is the mid to late 60s. So he just kept looking at it, and my grandmother started freaking out and started saying, "What do we do?" And my grandfather was like, "Well, if we call the cops, nothing's really going to happen." He was like, "I think the best thing is to call the local Coast Guard that can bring members of the air, not the Coast Guard, members of the Air Force here, because he had large connections to the Air Force." And he kept staring at the craft. He called the Air Force, and the craft did not move. But the second he got off the phone, the aircraft was gone. And the Air Force comes, and they start questioning my grandmother and my grandfather. And they put him off to the side and said, "Is your wife schizophrenic?" And he was like, "No." He's like, "And I also saw it. Like, I also witnessed this craft above my cherry tree in the backyard that did not move and hovered in silence." So it was very and this is not made up. This is not for the show. This is actually, my grandfather said to my grandmother that my mother told me. And we after that, they kept asking if like she was mentally ill, and my grandfather kept insisting that it wasn't true, that he had credentials to back it up. And that's all I know from that story. But do I believe in extraterrestrial? Extraterrestrial, absolutely. There's this concept called the Fermi paradox, which is the idea that there's so many different places where life could be in the universe, but at the same time, we haven't found it yet. And I think it's very close-minded for us to presume that life on Earth life in other places in the universe have to evolve in the way that life did on Earth. I mean, who's to say that there isn't a whatchamacallit? Who's to say there isn't I guess you could say a life form that breathes nitrogen? How would that be? How is that? There's a very strange presumption, and I think it's just out of human ignorance, that people are under the assumption that life can't evolve in other places. And on Titan, for example, which is one of Saturn's moons, there is a ocean, and nitrogen itself is not naturally occurring. It's artificially made. So something has to be creating it down there. Whatever that is, I don't know. But nitrogen is not naturally created. It's artificially created. So on Saturn's moon, Titan, there is skepticism and speculation about what could be creating that.
Oh, that's interesting. And wasn't Titan the place where I'm not trying to spark a debate, a debate
No, of
about
course.
space and space exploration in the chat. But isn't there what was it? Didn't we land something on Titan? Like
Oh
maybe
gosh,
10 years ago or something? Something did land, but it died within half an hour. Was
that's
it
a
Titan?
it could have been. I know that we've landed stuff on Venus,
Mm-hmm.
and that literally they took one picture and then it went into ashes because a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people realize that Venus is actually hotter than Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm not exactly sure. That's a very good question.
Yeah, no, 'cause I feel like it was there with the
Let me see.
rover,
Hold on.
and
Let
then
me look it up.
and then it went out. And what's intriguing, it's like, okay, because I know a lot of people don't believe in space or don't believe in what NASA's feeding, us, but, let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's say it was all legit. Um, the fact that, it died after half an hour, okay,
You're
yes,
right.
the conditions are extreme, but it also makes me wonder, did it see something that, did it figure out what was changing the nitrogen? And, and they shut down the feed and told us that the thing stopped working because they don't want us to know what's on Titan. It makes you wonder. Um,
And
same
you were
thing.
right.
Same thing with Venus. Like, you don't know what's living under the clouds. There could be a whole civilization, but we wouldn't know. And they're used to that whole atmosphere,
Hmm.
because it's basically like a giant greenhouse over there.
Yes.
But again, did the lander fail, or was it shut off because of whatever reason? And okay, yes,
Sure.
that's older tech, but like now we have things that like actually go into the sun's atmosphere. We
Yep.
have certain probes, and so I would think now that we have the ability to do that, why aren't they exploring Venus? I'm like, why aren't people more intrigued by Venus? Because me, I would be fascinated. I would always be sending things to know what's under that cloud cover if it were me, up to me.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right about it was called Huygens. It was
Mm,
named after a 17th century Dutch astronomer named Christian Huygens, and it was an atmospheric entry robotic space probe that landed on Saturn's moon Titan in 2005. And
okay.
it came in at approximate speeds of 44,000 miles per hour. Um, the probe was designed to gather data for a few short hours in the atmosphere, and possibly a short time at the surface. It continued to send data for about 90 minutes after touchdown. After that, it's not showing if it got destroyed. I'm going to presume that it did.
Mhm.
Um, but I believe personally that we should be focusing more on planets like Venus, for example. I think that there is not, like, again, even naivety in the science community, that there's this assumption, like I said before, that life can't develop and withstand certain things that humans could not. Like, there could be a life form that thrives in 700 degrees.
Oh
There
yeah,
could
what
be
happened in the ocean?
yeah,
Mhm.
very yeah, exactly. I was just about to bring that up. Like, very well said. There's things in the ocean that are 5 miles deep that are freezing cold, and they thrive down there. There are life forms that live in the air. There are life.
Mhm.
This could be bacteria. This could be anything.
Yeah.
And there's definitely there's definitely something to be said where life could exist, I believe, anywhere, and to presume that it can't simply because of humanity and the way Earth has evolved. I think it's um I think it's rather silly to think that. However, there is a scientific notion called the anthropic principle, and the anthropic principle basically states that the universe appears to be fine tuned for the existence of life on Earth only.
Mm.
And right now in 2023, unless the government, which I'm sure they are, is it is hiding something from us, I think that we literally have this notion from the anthropic principle that maybe civilization for this universe is fine tuned for humanity. Do I think that? No, but do I think it's a possibility? There's nothing out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, never say never. I mean,
Yeah,
and in terms of things on other planets, it's like, it's that Jurassic Park quote, "Life
yeah,
finds a way."
yeah.
I mean, and here's the thing, because I am one of those people that do believe space is real, I don't trust NASA though, because I believe part of the reason why they're not exploring these planets, because this should be the obvious thing. Instead of wasting money doing other stupid stuff, why aren't we
Mhm.
going to Venus that's right next to us? Why aren't we exploring Saturn's planets? So my view is that that it's all pretend, that there is contact that has been made, that there is a secret space program, and our space program is a front to show us, oh look, this is all we've done so far, we can't do this yet, we lost the tech for the moon, this that, and that there's so much more sinister things happening right now in space, and that's why they're not telling us, they're interacting with it.
Yeah.
um and so and like the more I start hearing about the secret space program and what's involved in it and people that are supposed survivors of it, I mean, it's really mind-bending stuff. I'm like, that has to be it. NASA has to be the happy little front so everybody thinks, is all content. Oh, cool, moon, this, that. Um, because I feel like, if humanity had ever heard about the secret space program, people would just be pooping in their pants.
Yeah, no, I would be very hesitant to trust the intricacies of NASA for a variety of reasons. One would be Operation Paperclip. I mean, Operation Paperclip, for people who aren't aware, is basically after World War II ended, a lot of Allied powers, specifically the United States, um, took high-ranking officials of the Nazi Party and integrated them and assimilated them into Allied
Mm,
power.
yeah.
The leader of the leader of the EU was at the time was a former Nazi. The leader of I think his name was von Braun, who was the leader of NASA. He was also a former Nazi. So it begs the question of what's valid and what's not. But I will say, on the topic of aliens and extraterrestrials, have you ever heard of Lights Over Phoenix?
Oh, yeah, the Phoenix Lights, yeah.
My father's friend actually lived in Phoenix and was there for that day.
Oh,
And
wow.
I asked him about it. And I
Mm,
said, "Well, what exactly happened?" He's like, "Well, the thing that sucked was that in the desert at night, it's very difficult to see what the hell's going on.
mm.
But in the shadows, it looked like a very large craft that was over Phoenix, and it almost looked like the boomerang type structure of a ship, and it was just very quiet, and it just went over the city, and that was it. And like he swears by it, so I'll take his word for it.
And, yeah, I've been fascinated about the Phoenix Lights since I was a kid. I love them, and it's wild to me that people, like, try to pass it off. "Oh, no, those are military flares," and they
No.
eventually sunk down over the mountain, like, everything that they try to do to explain that away, and the fact that people even buy into it is mind-blowing. But, beside that, I think it's really interesting, and I had never heard it put this way until it was at the UFO fair in Pine Bush, up in Orange County. I was listening to Linda Zimmerman speak, who's a big Hudson Valley UFO researcher, and she said the event that happened in Phoenix happened throughout the big time of the UFOs in the Hudson Valley in the 80s and 90s. She's like, that happened every night in the Hudson Valley, the same exact type of craft, but yet it was like media silence on it. Nobody, and that was such a huge event in Phoenix. So it's like, if the world knew what was happening in the
Yep.
Hudson Valley every single night. I mean, had you heard about the Hudson Valley sightings or know anybody who's witnessed it?
I haven't heard of anybody who's witnessed them. Most of my friends come from Long Island. I unfortunately don't have any friends from in the Hudson Valley, but I have heard of that, and I wouldn't doubt it if there is some connectivity.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of that. I think there's a lot of validation in extraterrestrials from actually a movie that actually played as half a documentary, and that's called The Fourth Kind. That was a
Oh,
terrifying
which one?
movie. I love the movie. That was a terrifying movie,
Oh, that
but
was.
it takes a lot of the notion that aliens were actually gods that humans used to worship, specifically Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki. And like during the translations that were happening, he says that I'm Anu, and
Mhm,
Anu is one of the four major gods of Sumerian religion, and he's the Lord of the Sky, which would make perfect sense if
mhm.
extraterrestrials come from the sky. So I haven't heard much about the Hudson Valley extraterrestrials, but and UFO sightings, but I do believe that extraterrestrials they do have some type of historical context in humanity's history, possibly.
Yeah. Oh no, I mean definitely there seems to be something there. I actually take kind of a similar perspective, but it almost kind of goes the reverse. Like the idea um the fallen angels and then
Yeah.
them breeding with the humans, the Nephilim, and that the
Yeah.
Nephilim are the aliens, but they
Mhm.
let themselves be worshipped as gods. And that's where all our mythology comes from. People actually worshiping these evil entities who were pretending to humanity that they were gods,
Mhm.
but are actually evil. They're actually of Satan. And it was for me, it kind of connected all the dots when I put it into that perspective, kind of like that Book of Enoch perspective.
Mhm.
Um, but I was gonna jump off of that. But I completely lost my Fourth Kind, though. Fourth Kind, amazing movie. That was so good. We saw it as a family.
Awesome.
We were like one of the only few people in the theater. So it was like the four of us. We were just
Yeah.
like had to sit there for a second after that was over because of that big reveal at the end. I have the
Yeah.
Blu-ray somewhere. I love that movie. So for anyone who hasn't seen that, highly recommend it. One of the best alien movies of
I
like,
agree.
yeah, the past 20 years. But it was also, by the way, brilliant marketing. At
Yes.
the time, they for anyone who's not familiar with it, they marketed it as being a true story,
Yeah.
and they planted the website so when you did the research, you actually found everything backing it up, and it looked real. And people were like losing their minds over it, like really freaked out and scared. But I mean, that was memorable. I wish they were still making movies like that and doing
I
that kind
agree.
of thing.
Yeah. Most
But
movies
you,
today suck.
but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said most movies today are terrible compared to
Oh,
what they
no,
used
yeah,
to.
they are terrible, but it's also kind of interesting the fact that you said it's like a documentary and, with predictive programming and that type of thing, you really do wonder how much of the stuff is documentary and them feeding stuff
Mhm.
to us
I agree.
because of their belief in, like, karmic whatever, that they have to, like, ask us permission by showing us this stuff.
Mhm.
It's I really, it used to be like, oh, what a coincidence, but I'm like, oh, I really do believe that's intentional. It really is partial documentary. A lot of these things. And speaking of like New York sightings, I wanted to just pull this out, put this aside. Witnessed. This is a wild sighting. Have you heard about the Brooklyn Bridge sightings? It was
No.
the true story of the Brooklyn Bridge abduction. So there was actually a lot of people. I think this was 89. Yep, November 30th, 89 at 3 in the morning. Several witnesses, including a major political leader. And I think cops saw this event. Like they actually witnessed somebody near the Brooklyn Bridge getting like beamed up into a UFO. And so Bud Hawkins did an investigation and wrote about it. And I'm like, this is right in Brooklyn, and nobody talks
Yeah.
about this. So I have been meaning to read it, and then I put the book in storage, and then I'm like, oh shoot, well I gotta go to the library now and get it. But so yeah, so I definitely plan to be reading that. But again, something it's wild because we live near there and have never heard of that.
No, I haven't. It's amazing how these type of things are so easily brushed under the carpet because the media controls basically everything we think and
Mm,
how we think it and when we think it. So, like something as I would say as life changing as learning about something like that with validity and verification through, I guess you could say, empirical analysis. Um, it's brushed under the carpet simply because of the media doesn't want you to know about it. The government doesn't want you to know about it because will it lead to pandemonium? Will it lead to the questioning of faith? Will it lead to the idea that humanity is not a unique species in the universe? It begs a lot of those questions, and I think one of the reasons why, if aliens do exist, if the extraterrestrial phenomenon does exist, um, I definitely believe that there is there's a reason why the state doesn't show us. I think they presume that it'll lead to pandemonium, which I don't necessarily agree. I think it's
mm,
almost like people would be like, well, I mean, I think it would be a shell shock to the world, but at the same time, I think it would be like, well, this is kind of expected. I mean, this is conspiracies most of the time, and generally,
yeah,
having some type of validity at the end.
yeah,
So even if it was just microscopic life, even if it wasn't even like extraterrestrial, like what we would consider bipedal humanoid
yeah.
type creatures, even if they were just like one celled organisms outside of outside of Earth, I wouldn't doubt it if that existed, hands down.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, microbial life. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, haven't we kind of already found some slight evidence of it? That Mars
Uh-huh.
meteorite that had somehow landed on Earth years ago,
That
I think, didn't have fossilized microbes.
it
Uh,
was, yeah, a
yeah.
rock that, yeah.
Right, okay, but my thing is, like, I almost feel like people aren't able to reason and think outside of the box anymore, so I feel like even if people did hear about microbial life on other planets, I feel like it wouldn't even phase them. I kind of feel like there's kind of like they leave the mystery of it and the holding back of it for many reasons. Part of it is because I believe it's spiritual. I believe it does prove certain things in the Bible and in religion that it proves it real, and the powers that be don't want it to be proven as real.
Yeah.
So that's one theory of mine. But another one of mine is sinister purposes, because if they can make it seem scary and they can make it seem like, then they could Project Blue Beam us, fake an alien invasion, and then get us into lockdowns or whatever they want. Oh, for the good of humanity, you need to follow these rules to protect yourselves, that they can use it against us.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, do you have any thoughts on Project Blue Beam?
No, I think that the state usually utilizes the name of safety
Hmm.
to justify hostile action, and to
Oh.
equate that project, Bluebeam, we could equate it to the Patriot Act, for example,
Oh.
where the Patriot Act basically justifies surveillance on people on the basis of fear, on the
Mhm.
basis of what happened in 9/11. Fear is utilized by the state to justify what would be perceived as hostile action against the population in the name of fear and security.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have a doubt in my mind that they would utilize that as a means to how they were going to use during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The U.S. government was actually going to, like, instead of like a Batman in the sky, they were going to project a they were going to project a picture of Jesus in the sky
Mm.
as a means to justify the Bay of Pigs invasion. So,
Like,
so
look at this religious miracle. We're doing the right thing.
hmm
Yeah.
so there's down they and every time and anytime the state tries to justify something in the
Mhm.
name of security, it's you got to be very prudent in what they're doing. You got to be very prudent and trepidatious.
Oh,
So
for sure. Yeah. No, the Patriot Act is like the perfect example, because, like, as a kid, I'm like, oh, you kind of assume, oh, they must be doing it for a reason. Oh, must help things. But then, you grow up and you're like, wait, none of this makes sense. It was all an
yeah,
excuse. And I know a lot of people want to argue that about TSA too, like, that it honestly, and it's probably an unpopular opinion, I don't really care about TSA because I don't own the plane. So if I don't own the plane, I got to submit to somebody's rules to get on their plane. I kind of feel like, I don't control the rules. Okay, but maybe each private airline should be making their own rules. But otherwise, for everything else, yeah, no, I'm with you. And I think we spoke about this on your show that these past three, are we almost at 3 years now? These past 3 years, where for
pandemic.
anybody who didn't believe it, it was the perfect example, and I think it opened up a lot of people's eyes, and that we still have people just living in complete fear. I did kind of, for anybody that saw, yeah, I kind of tweeted about that, how some people are still like that, where I was
Yeah,
with somebody who was putting on their mask between sips of their cocktail, and it
yeah,
it kind of, yeah, it freaked me out. I'm like, you're out in public. The virus isn't going to wait every time you put your mask back on.
true.
Yeah. So, I mean, you really do see how easily
It's
people are
sad.
manipulated by fear.
Yeah, it's sad, and they know they can do it because fear is basically the most fundamental human emotion. It's on the basis. Fear is synonymous with the human instinct of survival. So
Mhm.
that's why it's so easily utilized and manipulated to convey a narrative or a new policy to a population.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then everybody's just going to go along with it.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and I'm sorry, I'm just going to, oh, I dropped my stuff.
No,
I'm
it's
just
okay.
going I just want to answer Mango Junkie's question. Which alien movie? The fourth kind. I forget how to pronounce her name, Jojovich, but Mila Jovovich from Fifth Element was in that. So I guess she's like one of those sci-fi queens.
Yeah, Resident
You
Evil
get
girl.
sci-fi from her. But and Brian says TSA doesn't own the plane either. Just saying, yes, yeah. So that's why I ended up saying, well, I guess the private airlines should be making their own rules, definitely.
Exactly.
But no, but like if I owned my own plane and TSA is like, no, we need to do it, I would lose it. But that's not a problem at the moment that I have to worry about. And so Lit has a question. How do you feel about ancient advanced cultures? Do you think that was a thing and that there were cultures more advanced than than the powers that be let us know? Like, we read our history books. It's obviously an edited version of
Of
history,
course.
but our history might be more amazing than they're letting us believe. What do you think about that?
So I think that there was a Library of Alexandria that had so much information, so much knowledge, and so much the acquisition of cultural knowledge and ideals and visions that existed. And I'm almost positive that was the Romans that burned the Library of Alexandria to the ground. And there was so much speculation of what could have been in that library.
Mhm.
But there was this really interesting episode of Joe Rogan where there was this idea that around 9600 BCE, there was a great flood, the one that's constantly discussed in Hindu tradition, in Mesopotamian tradition, and Jewish and Christian tradition, that there was a past civilization prior to that flood. And the most notable discussion was the continent of what we would define as Atlantis. And the idea was that the Great Flood around 9600, which was synonymous, actually, if we go back to that, the end of the last ice age, which would kind of make sense that there is a flood during the last time of the last ice age, that there could have been an advanced civilization. Like the way we understand mankind's growth in society and civilization is very skewed. Like there's this common belief that civilization, like the rise of the state, happened around 4000, but then every other day we find a new temple that's older than that, and it's like, oh, civilization existed prior to that. Like Göbekli Tepe, for example in Turkey, was a temple around that was through carbon dating, whether you guys believe that or not. I believe it was carbon dating around the year the temple was created around 8000, 9000. So, and there was a lot of paintings on the structures. It was a very interesting scenario to see because it rewrites human history. So do I believe advanced civilizations existed? Yeah, I mean, we looked over this in history, for example, like the Minoan civilization, which I believe was on the island of Crete, and they were a very advanced civilization. They were a civilization that preceded the Greeks, the Mycenaeans, the Phoenicians, and they were very advanced. And out of nowhere, their culture disappeared. There's some presumptions that it was either a foreign invasion or a flood or a volcanic event that happened in the Mediterranean somewhere that destroyed them. But I definitely believe there are civilizations out there that existed prior to what we perceive as the rise of civilization, like the Indus River Valley, Mesopotamia, Egypt, China. I definitely believe there were civilizations prior to that that had more advanced technology. Do I believe that they were as advanced as we are now? Probably not. But I do believe that there were civilizations prior to what we were told surrounding the rise of the state. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and when you look at some of these massive structures and we're fed some like information like, okay, the Egyptians completed the pyramids in this amount of time, which they say would be impossible because you would have to be laying one of those blocks every 10 seconds. That
Yeah.
is just an impossibility. So I tend to veer more to the extreme that there's lost technology that when we talk more advanced, I don't mean like, retrofuturism or, like
Right.
what was the 50s
Yeah.
view of 2000, like, that they
Right.
weren't like that they didn't have rockets, but just that they were more advanced with like they learned to harness the earth's energy, that they learned free energy, that they learned how to use different frequencies and magnetism to do things. And that, there's this idea that earth has been through many great resets, and that
Yes.
a lot of this evidence was wiped, and that we're undergoing a reset now, and that it's just been
Mhm.
something throughout history. So the more I dig into that, I really, it's hard to believe
Yeah.
anything we were
No,
taught.
no, no,
It,
I'm laughing because I believe it myself, because I was
yeah.
gonna bring this comment up that I definitely do believe there was some advanced type of technology that existed. I mean, the Egyptian pyramids, for example, were built around the year 2474, as we're told, BCE.
Mhm.
And they were not surpassed in height until about 1000, about almost, I think, 20, 14, 420, almost a little bit longer than 4,000 years. I believe the Trinity Church surpassed its height. I think that speaks volumes that a structure existed for 4,000 years, and
Mhm.
human technology did not have the ability to surpass the height of that specific structure that existed. The Roman, the the birth of Jesus is closer to our time than the building of the pyramids.
Mhm. Yeah, that it was
So
ancient. Yeah, to
yeah,
them. That I had never thought about until I put it that way. I'm like, wow. So when they looked at that and they looked at those structures, they look at it the same way we that we do.
yeah,
Wow, look at these
yeah,
ancient structures, and like I'm sure they were marveling the same way. How did they
yeah,
build it too? And I think it's interesting that you say that, because when you think about, the time scales in history, you're like, wow, we're not that far out from the birth of Jesus. People tend to
no,
look at it as this really ancient time, but like we're not. They had technology, they had aqueducts, they had a lot going
yeah,
on for them under the Roman Empire. Yes, they're brutal,
mhm,
but technologically, it was an interesting time to be living in.
agreed.
Um, and yeah, and Lit agrees with you that most oldest ancient cities were swallowed in the ocean as well, man.
Yeah,
Well, they say, what is it? Only like 3% of the ocean has been explored.
yes,
And I'm sure if this stuff is found, nobody knows. Everybody ends up dead. Who
yeah, exactly.
finds any of this stuff? So we wouldn't even know. And John Davis says the Great Flood of Noah's day wiped out the advanced knowledge of ancient cultures, which, for example, leaves us unable to build structures like the Great Pyramids of Giza today. Yeah, and I agree with that completely. So John Davis's perspectives, we share a lot of the same perspectives.
Mhm.
That yeah, all those records that time before the flood was it was not a nice time, and that's why the flood
No,
came and was sent. But also technologically, it was insane. It really, they were dealing with fallen angel technology, and and I guess the intention. Besides, we believe that it was a cleansing of the genome, the flood.
mhm,
I think it was also a cleansing of the information, so that we
I
couldn't mimic
agree.
a lot of this technology. So it's really it's amazing how much more there is to the world than what we're taught. We grow up with
Mhm.
such a narrow view, and it kind of seems a little, the world starts to seem boring. But when you start looking at it this way, I feel like you kind of, I don't know, it revives I don't know, that enthusiasm for learning
Yes,
and for the world and everything going on.
I
Um
agree,
and
100%.
and sorry, we have another comment here. I'm just getting a little distracted by the live chat. Intellectually, humanity has devolved over the generations, which is contrary to the theory of evolution held by the intelligentsia. Hence our ability to duplicate much today from the ancient world. And I feel like we are devolving like at an exponential rate. When you see
Yes.
people's capabilities, people can't spell, people can't do this, can't do
Mhm.
that. And I think that's just an in completely intentional thing, an intentional
I
dumbing
agree.
down. I think as teachers, we've both seen that.
Yes, and I think convenience of technology has led to the the reliance of our, I'm trying to put this into words that make sense. Um, the convenience and reliancy on technology has made it to a point where people no longer have to learn the way we were taught and educated since prior to the Industrial Revolution, because everything is basically done for us. I don't, I don't. It's almost like there's this particular teaching method that I don't agree with called the banking method, where it's basically like I tell you 2 + 2 = 4. You regurgitate it to me. You don't know what
Mhm.
2 is. You don't know what 4 is, but you know 2 + 2 = 4.
Mhm.
So that type of educational model that we have in society, it's based on one, the philosophy of just regurgitation of information, and two, we have technological innovation that basically allows us to just live in a state of ignorance as a result of de-evolution. I mean, you could see civilizations, they go in 3 phases. They go in the barbarism phase, they go into the civilization phase, and they either stay in the civilization phase or they go into the dissension into decadence. And I
Mhm.
believe the West is devolving into decadence. You see it. We're in an overly hedonistic society. We're in a society that you see animosity towards education, and not even contemporary, not even educational institutions, just self-taught, being autodidactic or acquiring information on your own accord rather than traditional education methods. And even traditional education, I know that you and I spoke about this on our stream, that you got out of education simply because you weren't in agreement with the way the paradigm was working. And I don't want to teach simply because of that either, because
Mhm.
we're not teaching people how to think for themselves. We're teaching them what to think, and that's
Yeah.
not a viable solution for a advanced civilization. And I wanted to go back to something that there was a comment about advanced civilization. It's very peculiar to me that in the Bible there's the Tower of Babel, for example. So the Tower
Mhm.
of Babel, basically, you have this growing structure in the sky. Many people believe it was either the ziggurat of Ur, which was about 200 feet in the air. It's still standing today, or it was the ziggurat in the heart of Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, which was around 630 BCE or something like that. So when you have humanity being able to achieve things with technological innovation, and you have these, whether you want to call it God or you want to call it an extraterrestrial civilization that starts seeing that humanity is is um, is an accelerationist, and humanity succumbs to accelerationism regarding technology. um, it can be very frightening for another civilization that's watching us, that they're able to advance so quickly. So why not scatter them throughout the world so that knowledge is lost, so that language, so that there can't be an acquisition of knowledge because you speak a language that I don't even know what the hell you're saying, and vice versa.
Mhm.
So it's definitely and we've seen how fast humanity can grow in technological innovation. I mean, it's 2023, 140, 50 years ago, we didn't have cars. We were still using horses. And in 3 generations' time, we went from the 1870s to not having cars, to not having planes, to not having televisions, computers, the internet, nuclear weapons, space probes, to all of this from 1870 to about 110 years later. I mean, that is a fascinating notion. There's this quote in this book that I loved from college, and it said that there's more technological advancement in the last 2 days than any other century prior to 1700. So
Mhm.
basically, there's more innovation in our world in 2 days than in 100 years prior to the 18th century. Eh, It
Yeah.
goes to show accelerationism can be very intimidating for a opposing civilization or an authority figure that wants to keep mankind's civil as knowledge of history or knowledge of technology down.
And have you ever heard the other theory of it, that humanity was scattered at the Tower of Babel because they were building a spiritual portal that was going to wreak, yeah, chaos. So
Yeah,
it's interesting, a lot of interesting perspectives on it, which of course I feel like we'll never find out in this
no,
life,
I don't think so
but
either.
yeah, but in terms of exponential, technological growth, yeah, I mean, we have everything at our fingertips. So it
Yep,
makes sense that we would be able to kind of, I would say, evolve technologically so quickly in just a matter of days. But I do feel like we're hitting the tipping point that even with all this at our fingers, we still are hitting the human
yep,
knowledge de-evolution, which is unfortunate because I was driving and I was pondering that today. I was like, wow, what did we do before we could just Google everything at our fingertips? I'm
Yeah.
like, and how amazing it was at the time when you could go to Ask Jeeves and Ask Jeeves whatever, like in the early
Yep.
days of it.
Oh my
But
God.
just now just being used for the stupidest stuff, where we could be advancing ourselves so much. But,
Yeah.
I do think that is because when you also talk about, well, what about a competing civilization? Wouldn't that be intimidating to see people able to do that? But I also kind of look at it as, well, we're intimidating to the powers that be. So
Yeah.
that's their
Yeah.
way of fighting against us because, oh, look, the peons are growing so fast in their knowledge and technology, they're going to overthrow us. So let's suppress them by giving them their bread and their circuses.
Very well
So,
said. I agree.
and it's really wild that you also touched on what's it called, that thing, the banking idea of
Banking.
education, because
Mhm.
that was something that always bothered me as a kid,
Yep.
because when
Hated
I
it.
was learning math I struggled in math, and part of it was because I wanted to know why, and they were trying to make me memorize, but in order
Yep.
to memorize my brain needed to know, but why is that? uh, like, yeah, I'm sure I easily, had I set my mind to it, could have figured out the times tables, but I wanted to know why 2 times 2 made 4. um and so it was nice to hear somebody mention it, because that
Yeah,
just
no,
drove me crazy as a kid. And you said it bothered you too.
it bothered me too because it was a Fordist education mentality. It basically that type of educational pedagogy derives itself from the assembly line Fordist mentality
Mm.
of education, where I'm going to teach you directional based learning just so you are able to do a job successfully on the assembly line.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to. That it comes down to education. One of my professors, who I really love, but really hated that he said this, because I really love this guy. Great professor, great man, superintendent of a local school district. And he said to us one day, and I staunchly disagreed, but said nothing because I respected him, and I still do. And he said, teachers are not here to educate the population. They're here to prepare students for the world of work.
Mm.
And I couldn't get myself to agree with that 100%, because as much as that's true in some ways, you need to give students the tools to understand socialization, networking, critical thinking, to survive and thrive with the challenges of the 21st century. It's not all about instilling values to be able to be a corks, I mean, a screw or a gear in the labor force. I don't agree with that type of turn of the century industrial revolution type education. And I think that's also what's stalling us as well, is our educational systems are they're very archaic. They're very political in their latent way of teaching. And as a result of this, we're going through, and to relate this back to the past, we're going through our own loss of information in a world where information is right at our fingertips. It's one of the biggest paradoxes of information I've ever seen, because this didn't occur. This kind of occurred in 1466 when Johannes Gutenberg. I brought this up in my last stream, actually. Johannes Gutenberg um, created the printing press, and it was very fearful for the elites because of the fact that they were aware now that serfs and plebeians were able to get books, because books were no longer a luxurious commodity for the rich only. Now everything could be mass produced. Every book could be mass produced, which could lead to intelligent thought. And it's peculiar because only nearly 200 years later, you had the Enlightenment era, and at the same time you had humanism. At the same time, right after the Black Death, you had the 1340s. Then that the Black Death hit Europe. Um, People thought that was the end of the world. People thought it was God. Then you had 100 years later after that, you had the printing press. And then 50 years after the printing press, you had the Renaissance in Italy. And it goes to show how fast, even 500 years ago, 600 years ago, that human intellect can change so much. But the thing that people don't understand is that it doesn't matter how much intellectual knowledge you feed to someone. History is always cyclical
Mhm.
because of human instinct. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter until we become like a tier 1 or a tier 0 civilization on the Kardashev scale. I don't believe that you can weed out the ape or the instinct per
Mhm.
se in the human psyche. And that's why you have the same thing happening over and over again. New innovations lead to warfare.
Yeah.
New warfare. Um, Poverty still exists, even though we have the tools to end poverty. We have the tools to end equality. I mean, to end poverty, to end social inequities. But
Mhm.
they don't happen because of human instinct. They don't happen because we let avarice, we let the love of opulence, we let greed, we let self interest, which is really based off of human instinct,
Yeah.
thrive, and that really takes away from our society. It creates a deletion of human intellectual advancement.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah. And, I mean, at this point, I also feel like, we're not going back from that. No matter how much you try
yeah,
to wake people up, no, we're just too far gone. I mean, it's just like the mask situation. If you're trying
yep,
to explain a way to anybody who's wearing a mask, just give them some facts. I tried to plant some leading questions, some ideas, but if somebody doesn't grasp it, then they never will. Same thing, if you try to explain everything you just said to a normie, for lack of a better word, be
it ain't
like,
gonna happen.
wrong with you? We're at the peak of civil, it's only going to get better from now. But it's like, I don't know. You're staring at
Mm,
your phone for 8 hours a day. It's social media. What are you doing to contribute to this?
it's a
Um,
good point. It's
yeah,
a
I
very good
mean,
point.
and unfortunately, yeah, all of us who are in the chat and you and me, we do think outside the box. We are looking to explore, but it's funny that it makes us the weirdos now. To ask questions, to be discussing things like this back in the the old ancient days of civilizations where they sat around discussing things in a symposium. This would have made
Mhm.
us the elite. But now we're like, look at those nut jobs, but they're
The misfits.
tinfoil
Yeah,
hats. Yeah,
yeah.
we're the bad ones, but I guess that's the point, the demonization of us, so that they could discourage this type of thing.
Mhm.
I've had people, when I've spoken facts, jokingly a couple years ago, referred to me as a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, everything just went in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
I know you're joking, but that takes me off, that type of thing. So I mean, so at this point, I feel like is it even worth trying to wake people up, or is it just worth kind of just doing our thing in our own type of symposium?
Oh no,
And
it's
yeah.
funny you say that. No, it's true because you know what despots go. You know what type of people despots go for first is they go after the intellectuals and the teachers first. They
Yeah.
do the book burning first. That's what they
Mhm.
do because they either take the knowledge from the past and they skew it to fulfill their own status or despotic agendas. And there are many instances in history where that's happened. One happened in ancient China with an emperor by the name of Wang Ming. He basically said that he found some of Confucius's writings under his house, and he put those writings into his and he put those writings into his state policies. And what he did was a perfect psyops. He did a perfect psychological manipulation. Is that he took the knowledge of the past that people revered and utilized it to advance his own cause.
Mm.
And I believe personally that elitist agendas, they specifically, right now, the elitist agenda is to instill ignorance because the fact that it fits a specific agenda. Whereas during the Enlightenment, intellectualization was the calling card of even back in the Enlightenment era. There was massive resistance because there was this idea of the consent of the governed, and that was against monarchy. That was against the ancien regime in France. That was against the English monarchy, the Habsburg monarchy. That was against the excuse me, the Holy Roman Empire. That was against all of the hierarchical structures in Europe where you have, oh, now we have the consent of the governed. We have this social contract. We have this idea of by the people for the people. What the hell is this? Like, no, this is a divine right or mandate of heaven type monarchy. And now the Enlightenment era, knowledge breeds threat to the elites. Why do you? I mean, I'm saying it's rhetorically, but why do you think that they're trying so hard to censor what's happening at the WEF? what's happening at the Bilderberg meetings, what happens at, excuse me, what's happening with the vaccinations and what's happening with people dying from them, from micro, whatever the hell that thing's called with your heart. There's reasons for all this. There's ulterior motives on why things are classified. Why do we not know the truth about JFK? Because all of this ends up being a threat to the global the global order of things.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have power, you don't want to get rid of it.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. And I'm sorry, I'm enjoying talking about this. I really like this. And I realize we're at the 1 hour, 10-minute mark. I mean, would you like to hang out a little more? Do you have some more time to
What time is it right now? I can't even see. My vision is so bad on my phone. So what is it, 10:30?
Yeah, it's 10:42. So I just
I got
wanted
10,
to check in. You good?
yeah, I got 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. So you know what? Let me hop over to just a couple more questions I have for you. But even though I'm really enjoying the way this is going, I just noticed the time.
No, it's
Um,
okay.
but so I just wanted to also hop back to some of your own experiences, because I know you said you've
Sure.
done a little ghost hunting, and I was also curious. You ever done any exploration of in Northport, that abandoned psychiatric hospital?
Oh, Kings Park. You're
Ah,
talking
yeah,
about,
that's
yeah,
it.
Kings Park. Yes, yes, which is right. In negligible difference. Northport is right next to Kings Park,
Okay.
but I know what you're talking about. I haven't, but many family members of mine have. Many families have climbed up to the roof of Kings Park, the psychiatric place. I have pictures. It's pretty horrifying to say the least.
Ooh.
Um, I haven't been there, but
Mhm.
where I have been is Gettysburg. I've been to ghost tours in Gettysburg.
Okay.
I can't
Shoot.
see what that's.
Oh no,
Oh,
so
okay.
that was yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I've done Gettysburg ghost tours, and I actually have a video of that on my channel where we were doing ghost tours in a Confederate hospital, um, right outside the park, literally like the backyard. You hop the fence, you're in Gettysburg Park. Um, and for those who are not aware, Gettysburg, the fight, the was basically the turning point of the Civil War. It occurred from the July 1st to July 3rd of 1863. What came out of that was basically the Gettysburg Address. About 50,000 people died on both the Union and Confederate side over those 3 days. And it was basically the turning point of the Civil War. And so we did a ghost tour throughout a Civil War hospital. And it was very interesting, to say the least. You definitely felt that eerie feeling like you weren't here. I mean, you were here before. Not that
Mhm.
you were here before, but that people were here before. And it was very unfortunately we couldn't go into the cellar, which is where like the morgue was. They didn't let us go down there. Not really sure why, but
Sorry,
also then
an issue here. Give me a moment. I'm
it's okay, take
sorry.
your time.
All right, so go on.
So yeah, so we did that. We had the we didn't get much, for what I remember. We didn't get much contact with the machines we had, but it was very eerie.
Ooh.
It was very eerie to be in a house that was 160 years old. Um, we actually went onto this dugout right behind Gettysburg, right behind the Confederate hospital, and it was basically just a mass grave. They were just throwing people into that grave because it was an unmarked grave, basically.
Mhm.
And you could tell it was an unmarked grave because it was like grass was here, and then out of nowhere there was this steep descent that was
Mm.
like a foot or two. Then we went to this I forgot her name. She was a baker. She was one of the only civilians, I believe, if not the only civilian. She was basically baking bread. I wish I remember her name. For Union soldiers, and she was shot in her own house from a Confederate sniper.
Wow.
And yeah, she was killed. I think she was like 18 or something like that. We went to our upstairs house. We went to the upstairs of her house, and like they brought a bunch of haunted things to that house. We saw this doll that was made with like human teeth and hair and like skin from the 1880s. There was a mirror from Ed and Lorraine Warren's Ed and Lorraine Warren's Investigations. If you guys don't know who that is, it's The Conjuring. There was like a haunted swastika as well in there that they found in I'm not sure if it was Berlin or right outside Berlin. And it was just very eerie. It was very cold in there. It was very dark. Um, it was just a very nefarious environment. You
Mm.
felt like very malevolent, and I wasn't able to stream that because my phone died, but that was actually very eerie.
Oh, it's
Um,
now was that like, your phone died because you expected it to die because it was
I
out of
expected it to die,
battery?
yeah.
Okay, because I was like, "Okay, is this something creepy that happened?" Okay.
No, no, but the creepiest stuff actually happens in my house. And
Mm.
in the beginning of the stream, I spoke about how this was a place, the land. I don't know if there was a house here before it or not, but the land was a place where priests would congregate. And so a lot of things have happened in my household over the years um, that were kind of terrifying, according to my mother and grandmother. So, for example, one day, right after my grandfather died when my mother was very young, I never met him. He died at 48 from a heart attack. Um, so one day, my mother was home. She was about 23, 24, and she was home alone during a thunderstorm. And my cat at the time, she was slowly walking up to the light in the middle of the hallway that we have downstairs, and the light was off. And the cat just kept staring at the light switch. My mother kept calling the cat over. Jinx, come over here. What are you doing? Like, come over here. Come over here. And she didn't move. And then 5 seconds later, the light switch goes literally on and off. The on button goes on. I mean, the button actually moves, and the cat, she runs all the way upstairs.
Mhm.
Um, when we first moved back into this house in 2009, we would have constant, all night. And this was a time, very coincidentally, I was very religious, almost to the point of obsession, actually to the point of obsession. And every night, every single night at a specific time, I believe it was around 1:57, that the smoke alarms would go off, and they wouldn't go off your typical beep, beep, beep. They'd only go off once and stop. And we check it every day. We checked the batteries, they were all fine. And it would be an anomaly, and we would think it would be broken if it was just one smoke alarm, but it was all of the
Mhm.
alarms in the house that kept going off. And we were curious about what was happening. Um, and we just couldn't figure it out. We had what was another incident that happened to my mother? We had a psychic, and I'm very skeptical about psychics. I don't believe that people are psychic, but we we went. My grandmother and mother went to a psychic that's never been in our household, and he said basically to them, which I'm still kind of skeptical about how the hell he knew about this. He said there's a portal to the afterlife and the afterlife into another dimension behind the fireplace in front of the TV in your living room. We have a fireplace downstairs right across from our living room. We no longer use it, but it was a very old style a fireplace that we have, but it's no longer in use.
Mhm.
And but the fact that he knew that there was a fireplace and said that's where your grandfather constantly comes in from. He died in 80. What year was it? It was, I think it was 85, something like that. 84, 83, or 85, or 86. I'm not sure. One of those years. And when they saw the psychic, this guy had no idea about my grandfather passing away, and he told my mother and grandmother that because my grandmother was like my house there's some paranormal events going on, and he was like, well, that's your husband coming in from behind the fireplace. There's a portal to the afterlife behind there. So I was like, okay, nice.
Creepy.
And yeah, horrifying. Um, what else has happened in this household? We've had doors shut, close arbitrarily. And you would presume that's from the wind, but we don't have much of a draft. I only actually have one window in my room, so
Mhm.
it's actually always warm in this room because of that. So we've had doors constantly shut and open. We've had we had a my grandma told me in the late '90s that a priest came in and was like, I sense a great peace in this house. And my grandmother explained the land that we lived on.
Mm.
And we had, what else did he say? What else has happened that my grandmother has said that I just don't remember? I think she said once, because we used to have a piano. There's a room we have that really isn't much. It's the laundry room. And we used to have a piano in there, very old style piano. She told me once she woke up to it at night, shortly after my grandfather died, because he died in his sleep, and the piano was going off for a few seconds, which is
Ooh.
not my cup of tea by any means. We don't have that piano anymore, um, but I've there's a lot of when I was younger, a lot of things used to happen in this house. To my knowledge, it's kind of died down. It hasn't happened in
I was
years.
gonna ask if you were still experiencing. Okay.
No, not. When I first moved back here in about anywhere between 12 and I think it was like 13, 14 years ago, it was really because so basically I lived with my mother and my father until I was they were divorced 5 years later. We moved back here before we moved to put an extension on this house, and it was very it was a lot more it was a lot more active then.
Hmm.
uh, then we moved back, then we moved out, moved in with my stepfather, then we moved back in 6 years later, and it started getting really active for the first 2 years that I was here. And at the same time, like I said, it was very, very coincidental, but at the same time, I was very religious. I was praying 25 prayers a day. I was reading the Bible every single day. It became to the point where I was obsessed, and it actually became a psychological problem. And this is when stuff actually was occurring the most at night. And it was, I didn't really fear it because I was very religious at the time.
Hmm.
But when I started looking at God from more of a metaphysical standpoint and more of a philosophical standpoint, rather than your notion of like the dogmatic Eastern Near East king
Hmm.
that's taught by many, um, the stuff kind of stopped.
Okay.
Um,
Interesting.
I I did go to a psychic once that told me, because at the time my grandfather's one of my grandfathers was still alive, the other one passed away, and he said your grandfather's your guardian angel, and I'm like, I'm the only male in my entire family. There's no male cousins, it's just me. All my
Mhm.
cousins are. Um, so it's a peculiar standpoint to say the least from that. Um, so it was when I first moved back here around 13, 14, no, about 14, 15 years old. It's a very strange time, I'll tell you that much.
So, like now, when you say that it's died down, um, is it gone completely, or is it just things here and there that you're dealing with?
Um, I haven't seen anything in years.
Okay,
At
so
least
it's
it stopped. Yeah.
okay, completely. So it's not just here and there; it's completely stopped.
No, for now, it seems like it stopped.
Interesting. So
Probably
this
after the stream, the lights will go off.
I know, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, are we provoking it?" So hope
That's fine.
everything stays, peaceful, and that we don't
Yeah,
trigger
me.
anything at the moment. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I just wanted to hop over and thank Brian. Thank you so much, Brian, for that donation. That's really kind of you. He said, "Awesome stream, Ashley and
Awesome.
Corey. Thank you both. You rock."
Yeah, Brian's a good fella. He supports me a lot as well. He's a good fella.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Thank you, Brian. No, I feel very lucky to have a lot of nice people in the chat and have gotten to know many wonderful people through this. So it's really been an amazing opportunity. And thank you for being on here. I know you said you had
Of
10
course.
minutes. So thank you for telling us your experiences and just for discussing this stuff. It's fun to just like throw these
It
ideas around and just see what our similarities and differences in
is.
our beliefs are. And yeah, so I really appreciate you coming on. I'm going to put your links in the description as soon as this is
Sure. Thank
over.
you.
So anyone who wants to check that out right after this is over, or anybody watching in the replay, thank you to anybody who is watching in the replay. If you, anyone who would love to give me a like and subscribe, I would really appreciate that. And just and this is what I was saying. I'm sorry, my brain can't think straight as usual.
Okay.
But to anyone watching in the replay, I always like to tell everybody, make sure you click the live chat. There's a lot of interesting things that get said and a lot of interesting links that get passed around. And Corey, I just wanted to give you a moment to promote what you do. If you want to promote any channels, links, you throw it out there. Though I think everybody in the chat knows you, but in case anyone new comes into the replay.
Well, thank you. I first want to say, make sure to subscribe to Ashley. I think that it's important to share the spotlight, not compete for it. I think that she is someone who has massive knowledge and education. And the reason why that's so valuable, one, is it's valuable for society, and two, it's valuable in cryptocurrency because, just like how you said, like before the age of information, no one's really doing their due diligence in cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. They're not. This is why some people get hacked, and some people get scammed, some people get rugged. Like, do some research, guys. Yeah. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video. Make sure to support Ashley and share this out and subscribe. It's very important. Content creators, we're not doing this to become rich. It doesn't matter. Like, unless you have like 100,000 to 200,000 subscribers and people watch, and you get like 50K views per video, you're making like enough to get fill up your tank maybe twice a month. Gas, maybe, if you're lucky, maybe. So make sure to subscribe to Ashley. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you like. Corey Costa's Crypto Coins. I specialize in basically interviewing people because I don't have any information. I just steal it from everyone else and make it come off as my own. I'm kidding.
I know. You're cracking me up though.
Yeah, so you can subscribe to my channel at Corey Costa's Crypto Coins. I have a Twitter at Corey Costa 123, and those are my only links. I don't have a TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, so those are really just the place you can find me. So yeah, Twitter and YouTube, and I specialize in interviews, and that's, I found out from, I think it was actually Lit who told me about you being an educator, and who had the same philosophical views on modern educational pedagogy, and that's how we met. So
yeah, which is awesome. So thank you to Lit for that, for making that connection.
Absolutely. So I can't thank you enough for having me on. I know we were talking about this right after Christmas, so I'm appreciative of coming on. I hope to be on again, and hope to have you on my channel again sometime soon as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would love that. You're welcome back whenever you'd like. And thank you for your patience with the fact that, like I said, you're way more organized than I am. I'm all over the place. Right. But I think everybody's gotten used to that from me. So yeah, so thank you again. And thank you to everybody watching live and in the replay. I love and appreciate you guys, and you all have a wonderful weekend. And Corey, I'll see you in the green room in a moment.
Yes, you will.
Oh, I pulled you out too fast. Sorry.
Okay, don't worry about it. I've had so many mistakes where I've done things on live streams that are hilarious.
Well, you know what? That's the fun thing. You just kind of roll with it.
I like that. That's what I'm talking
Just roll with it. Roll forward with it. So,
exactly.
All right. I'll see you in a few, and I'm going to wrap up over here.
Okay.
So thank you again, guys. After this is over, all Corey's links will be in the description. And if you'd like to support the channel in any way, all that info is below in the description too. So thank you guys for being in here, and have a wonderful night. And I will see you Monday to continue our Book of Enoch read. All right, guys. Bye. Thank you.